Hey everyone, my name's Dom. Welcome back to Dominish Books. Today it's time for another book review and I'm going to be talking about We Ride the Storm by Devin Madson. So stick around to find out what I thought of it. Okay, so for anyone who saw one of my recent videos where I read 5 first chapters of opening books in a series to decide which book I was going to read next, you will know that the winner was Devin Madson's We Ride the Storm. These were 5 series that I really wanted to get into, and essentially the one that had the most engaging, the most exciting for me opening chapter was this one. And one of the reasons that I wanted to read this book, other than the fact that it sounded good, is that is a gorgeous cover. I absolutely love that one, and books 2 and 3 in the series have got a similar design in different colours, so they look great together, and I'm hoping to pick those up to go along with this one on my shelf. I mentioned in that video that the opening chapter I thought, or certainly the opening part of the opening chapter, the opening kind of paragraph or so, was really strong. It really kind of stood out for me, and that the second and the third chapter I kind of skipped ahead because I'd already started reading at the point that I had to refilm that video. The second and the third chapters have openings that are very much similar in tone and could equally have served to be the opening of the book themselves. My understanding is that because this book was originally self-published, the opening has been moved around a little bit, because my understanding from sources I've seen is that chapter 2 was the original opening of the book, and that's now been superseded by the opening we have here. So this one was, as I say, it was originally self-published, and shortly before book 2 in the series was due to be released, that was delayed because the series had been picked up by Orbit and were going to be traditionally published. So that, if nothing else, is a testament to the quality of this book, because it's not every self-published book that gets picked up and is then moved over to traditional publishing. So I mentioned when looking at those opening chapters for this particular book that there are 3 main characters, and in the opening we have 1 chapter from each of those, and that carries on through the story. So although the chapters are of varying lengths, we do get a kind of an equal distribution of viewpoints, an equal distribution of time spent with each of these characters as the story progresses. Within this world, we've very much got a melting pot of different cultures, and our 3 main characters really represent those 3 different cultures. So we start off with Mikko. Mikko is a princess. She is the daughter of the emperors, but not of the emperor. My understanding is when the emperor took the throne, because he wasn't born to it, but when he took the throne, he took on the wife of his vanquished foe, and she either had very, very young twins or she was pregnant with twins at the time, and that was Mikko and her twin brother Tanaka. So to the outside world, I think most people kind of understand or believe that these are actually the children of the emperor, but the inner circle, the upper echelons of the empire, know that they are actually a different man's children. So Mikko kind of starts out a little bit in the shadow of her brother Tanaka. He is the one who, as the male, is expecting or hoping to be named as heir to the empire, and he goes through various classes of battle and tactics and so forth, and he says basically he won't do that unless Mikko also joins in, so she by extension gets these classes, this training that she wouldn't normally have the access to. So she's not necessarily a warrior princess, but she definitely has the potential to be a warrior princess. She knows what she's about, she knows politics and she knows warfare, despite women not being part of war in this particular culture. So our second main character is Ra-e-Taurin, and Ra is the captain of the Second Swords of Taurin, which is a part of a tribe, a nomadic tribe of horse people. So in terms of the cultures, if the empire, which is called Kizia, is kind of ancient China or ancient Japan, then I guess Ra's nation, the Levante, are kind of the Mongol Empire or something along those lines, very nomadic, and at various points different swords, they're called, have been exiled from their original homeland. So the kind of the breakdown that we have is you've got different tribes of horse people, and the Taurin is one, and within that they have, I don't know if there's any more than 3, but we have the first, the second and the third swords, which are basically groups, and then each individual warrior within those groups are also called swords. So Thorin is the captain of the second swords, and Gideon is the captain of the first swords, so that's kind of a hierarchy there, whereby Ra falls under Gideon's leadership when they are together, but they are normally not together. They are spread out in various different places. They travel around separately rather than as one big group. The Levante people are definitely warrior people. They are described as being bigger than the Kizians. They are described as having bigger horses, more powerful horses, and they have very specific beliefs. They're kind of seen as barbarians by the other cultures within this book, but that's more, I think, to do with a misunderstanding than through any necessary brutality through war. So we open up the kind of the scene where we meet Ra. He is, there's been a battle, there's been some death, and he is slicing through the neck of a fallen warrior to take away his head. Now, the Levante do this because of their beliefs. They think that if a person dies, you need to take away the head and burn it in a shrine to release the soul. And if you don't do that, then the soul of the fallen person, the fallen warrior, is going to be trapped and won't be able to be reborn. So at the end of every battle, you do see this quite a lot. The Levante warriors will go and they will start shearing through the necks of not only their fallen comrades, but also the fallen warriors on the other side. And I guess that's kind of, you fought with valor, so I'm going to release your soul. It's kind of a mark of respect. Whereas other cultures will see this as, they came through and they killed and they took away the heads, they are barbarians. So you can probably kind of see why they think that, but because Ra is a point of view character, we know the reasons for it, we know his particular feelings on it, and it is discussed actually at not necessarily great length, but it is discussed a few times through the books, why he's doing this and his feelings as he's doing so. So I quite like that about this particular character. Our third main character is Cassandra Marius. So the third kind of culture that we have here is Chiltay, and these are, I see them a bit more as kind of Westerners. So you've got Kizia as kind of ancient China, Japan. You've then got Levante, which is kind of Mongols. And then you've got Chiltay, which I see as being a bit more Western and see themselves as a bit more civilized than the other two cultures. But Chiltay are keen on war with Kizia. They want to invade Kizia and take over. And that's kind of at the very basic level, that's their motive. Within that, obviously, we see various different characters, mostly to do with the war side. We spend some time in kind of the travelling war bands as they progress on this campaign of invasion. But we also have this point of view character who's nothing really to do with that side of things. She's completely separate to the war effort, and that is Cassandra. So Cassandra is a prostitute who's also an assassin. She uses sex basically to get close to her marks and then kills them, and that's kind of where we open up her introduction. So all three of the opening chapters are dealing with death or talking about death, and have that same kind of tone, and I found that they were very strong openings, very strong introductions to each of our three main characters. So definite plus point as far as that goes. Cassandra's character is probably the one that I liked least. At some points I thought that I liked her the most, but I think overall it was I liked her the least, and that's partially because of the evolving nature of her character, and I just felt like she kind of stayed on a level throughout the book, whereas the other two characters, Mikko and Ra, both got better and better as the story went on. Cassandra is definitely a very able woman. She's very much able to look after herself. She does spend some time kind of caught up in battle, and she's able to look out for herself and get away safely and things like that. She does some of the typical kind of assassin stuff with not just actually going out and assassinating someone, but the infiltration side of things, which I quite like, and I liked the way that that was handled and the way that she schemed towards those ends. There were a couple of things that I won't talk about because of spoilers, but a couple of aspects to her character that I thought were interesting, but ultimately I think that's where I wasn't quite as on board with her, and I felt that they didn't allow quite as much growth as I would have liked to have seen from that particular character, but it was definitely a very interesting element of the story nonetheless. Onto the world building, we do have a map within this book, but the one that was inside the actual paperback I'm not a big fan of, because It's a little bit too dark. It needs better colour management for me for this one to work out in a print format, but I'll try to find a nice digital copy of the map to put up in the space as I normally do. With this one though, we're mainly seeing the Empire of Kizia. We hear about the other places, Levante and Chiltay, but we don't really see a lot of those. We see a little bit of Chiltay, but I don't think we see any of Levante. We just hear about it. So we see the different cultures as we spend time with different people, but in terms of the actual kind of landscape, it is all Kizia. We see various different towns, we see castles, palaces and so forth, and everything there is quite well done, I think, but we don't really learn a lot of the world with regards to the actual geography of it. What we learn mostly is about the culture, and I really like that split of the cultures that we have, and not only having 3 different characters with different cultures so you can experience each of those differences, but also you can experience how they view the other cultures, and I really like the way that was handled, especially with the Chiltay and the Levante, because they spend a lot of time together. But we do definitely get that from Kizia as well, as they're looking at these kind of barbarians, and you've got a mix of admiration and fear with regards to the Levante because they are these great warriors and they've seen what they can do in battle. With regards to the plot, there was a lot here that I liked. I liked the overall story with regards to Mikko. Although I wasn't really on board with it at first, I liked the story with regards to Ra, and for the most part I liked the story with regards to Cassandra. So with 3 characters and generally liking each of their storylines, that's definitely a winner. The other characters that we had really built on those storylines as well, so I loved that aspect of it. I thought that they really elevated each of our main characters with the interactions that they had with them. With regard to the politics side of things, which is kind of a driving force for a lot of the book, I don't normally go for the politics quite so much, but I thought it was really well handled here. I liked the scheming, I liked the ideas behind it, and I could really get on board with the characters as they are trying to pull together new ideas and trying to decide how are they going to put those into action, and then the changes that they have to make as outside influences interfere and so forth. So I really liked that part of it, and I think it was actually, despite my normal preferences, it was one of my kind of favourite parts of the books because I really liked the intensity of how it was handled, and because you also got to see a lot more from our particular point of view characters whilst this was happening. So it was a really enjoyable plot, even if I don't normally go towards the more political side of things. And I'm saying that bearing in mind that there's a lot of battle in this book as well, and there's a lot of planning and riding to war. There's a lot of the drive to just be at peace and to save your people and protect the empire, depending on which side of the coin you fall on here. So it's not that this book is just political intrigue, that is a part of it, but it's a part that I particularly liked here, probably more so because it's not normally one of my favourites. But here it was very well done, as indeed were the other parts of the storyline as well. Okay, so let's move on to my enjoyment of the book in itself. Overall, I'll start off with the overall rating. Especially as I got towards the end of the book, I found myself really enjoying this. I did at one point think that it might be pushing towards 5 stars. Didn't quite get there, and I'll explain why in a minute as we go through the summaries. But overall, I landed on 4.5 stars for We Ride the Storm because I just really enjoyed that storyline. I enjoyed the characters, I enjoyed the setting, I enjoyed the plot. So overall, there were a few things that I wasn't quite as on board with, but outside of that, it was highly enjoyable and a good solid 4.5 stars out of 5 for me. In terms of a breakdown, well, the enjoyment overall I've kind of just covered, and I scored this one 17 out of 20 because it was one of the more enjoyable books that I can remember reading recently, just in terms of pure enjoyment factor and excluding all else. The world building I gave 15 out of 20. I thought it was good, it was solid, but it wasn't spectacular. There was no real magic. There were little kind of elements of it, but it's more kind of divine magic rather than what you would normally expect to see. There's no wizards, mages, anything along those lines. But this is the type of book where you don't need the magic. A fantasy book doesn't have to have magic in it, and this is a good example of what you can do without relying on magic as one of your kind of driving factors. I'm hoping that, as usual, as this series goes on, we'll get to see more of the world, more of the cultures, and that'll start to improve on this score as we go along for world building. Characters then was 16 out of 20 because, barring those one or two little bits that I wasn't quite as sure on, I did overall really enjoy the characters, and particularly, as I said, Mikko and Ra, they built as the story went on, and I got more at home with them and definitely enjoyed their character arcs and the overall story that they were a part of even more as the book went on. And then the plot was also 16 out of 20 because, as I say, it was just really enjoyable overall, and I really liked the direction that the book was going in, the little twists and turns that we had, and the little things that the characters did to get out of these situations and to try and drive their own narrative rather than having it driven for them. For the writing style, this was one of my... In fact, this was probably the one thing that knocked it down from a 5 to a 4.5 star rating for me. The writing style, I gave 5 out of 10. Now, I've said previously that I'm not the biggest fan of first-person stories. I'm definitely getting used to it, and some of my favourite books are definitely in the first person. So it's not a case of you can't get a 5 star if it's a first-person read. That's absolutely not true. What I did find though was this is the first one, certainly as far as I can think of, this is the first story I've read that is in the first person despite having multiple point of view characters. So normally I'm used to just seeing through the eyes and hearing the thoughts of one person from start to end of the book, whereas this one we have those 3 different main characters, but each of their chapters is delivered from the first person point of view, and I found that a little bit much to get into at first. Each of the chapters is headed with the character name, so you know straight away whose chapter you're going to be reading, but it was a little bit weird for me having those 3 different characters all speaking as I did this, I did that. I did get used to it as the book went on, but it was a little bit strange. It was the one thing that didn't quite work for me, although I definitely got used to it, and if it's the same, as I imagine it would be in books 2, 3 and the upcoming book 4 in this series, then hopefully by the time I read those, it won't cause me such a problem because I'll already have that experience. I'll already be a bit more at home with it. Alright, moving on from the writing style, the pacing part of that though, I gave 4 out of 5 because it's not just about having a fast pace, but it's about having kind of an even pace and the right pace for the story that you're telling. This one was definitely, for the most part, fast paced, and I really felt that it suited the story. It was definitely, for me, the right pace to be telling this tale and led me to be reading it quite quickly, especially as the book moved on. You had kind of your slower points at the start, building and building as the book went on until the last few chapters were really nicely paced for me. So a really good score there. I really enjoyed the pacing in this particular book. And then that just leaves my discretionary section, which I've scored at 3 out of 5 because you've got some nice extras with this, that lovely cover, as I say. But one of the things that I really do like about this cover is that animation. If you look at it through your mobile phone on Google Lens, it does animate the cover. And I think that's a really nice little Easter egg that some of these Orbit books are starting to have, and I hope that continues. But the book itself, the cover itself, I really, really like. We've got a nice map in there, despite my comments about the one that was contained within the book itself. We've got some extras as well, which I don't normally go for, but you find out a bit more about the author. And I've got this on the Kindle as well, and there's a couple of opening chapters of other books on the Kindle and a third different book in the physical copy here. So you can read through those and get an idea of some other books that you might also enjoy if you like We Ride the Storm. So put it all together, overall that gives us 76%, which is a fantastic score. It puts it at equal 33rd in my long list of books that I've reviewed using this system. Okay, so that is all I've got time for today. Let me know in the comments down below if you've read or if you're looking to read We Ride the Storm. What are your thoughts on it? What are your expectations and hopes for it? Let me know, I'll be interested in hearing. If you like this review video, give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe if you haven't already done so. I'll hopefully see you again soon, but until then, as always, take care of yourselves, read some good books. Bye for now.